In the land of Israel, a boy named David tended his father's sheep under the sun-soaked hills of Bethlehem. He was the youngest among 8 sons of Jesse, overlooked in stature, but not in heart. With a harp in hand and faith in his soul, he often sang praises to the Lord while protecting his flock from lions and bears. Unknown to the world, this shepherd boy was chosen by God for a greater purpose. The prophet Samuel, led by divine instruction, came to Jesse's house and anointed David with oil. From that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. While King Saul reigned over Israel, a great threat loomed on the horizon. The Philistines, enemies of God's people, marched with their armies to the valley of Elah. There stood their champion, a giant named Goliath, over 9 feet tall, clad in bronze armor with a spear like a weaver's rod. For 40 days, Goliath mocked the armies of Israel, challenging them to send one man to fight him. Fear gripped the hearts of Saul's warriors, and none dared step forward. Meanwhile, Jesse sent David to deliver food to his brothers who were serving on the battlefield. Upon arriving, David heard the blasphemous taunts of the giant and saw the trembling Israelites. His heart burned with righteous anger. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? He asked. His words echoed louder than his voice. Though mocked by his brothers and doubted by others, David was brought before King Saul. Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him, David declared. Saul looked at the boy, doubtful. You are not able to go against him. You are only a youth. But David spoke of his past victories, how he struck down lions and bears to protect his sheep, and how the Lord delivered him from them. The Lord who rescued me will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine, he said. Saul agreed, offering his own armor, but David refused, for he had not tested them. Instead, he took his staff, chose 5 smooth stones from the brook, placed them in his shepherd's pouch, and with sling in hand, approached the battlefield. On the other side, Goliath roared with laughter when he saw the boy. Am I a dog, that you come at me with sticks? He bellowed, cursing David by his gods. But David replied, You come against me with sword and spear and javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. With those words, he ran toward the giant. The battlefield fell silent. David reached into his pouch, took out a stone, and slung it with divine precision. The stone sunk into Goliath's forehead. The giant stumbled, then fell face down to the ground. Victory was swift. Israel erupted with cries of triumph. David stood over Goliath, took the Philistine's sword, and cut off his head. The Philistines, seeing their champion dead, turned in terror and fled. The army of Israel pursued them with renewed courage. That day, a shepherd boy became a hero of a nation. King Saul marveled. Whose son is this youth? He asked. David was brought before him, holding Goliath's head. I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem, he said. From that day forward, David served in Saul's court. He became a warrior, a leader, and a man after God's own heart. Though many battles lay ahead, the battle in the valley of Elah remained the defining moment of David's early life. It wasn't strength, size, or weaponry that gave him victory, but faith, courage, and the hand of God. David's victory was not just over Goliath. It was over fear, doubt, and the voices that said he was too young, too small, too ordinary. He showed the world that with God, even the smallest can defeat giants. His story was told in every village, sung in every home, and remembered by every soul who had ever stood before something bigger than themselves. This was not the end, but the beginning, for David's path would lead to a throne, to trials and triumphs, to sounds and praises, to sin and redemption. Yet it all began in a valley, with a boy, a sling, a stone, and unwavering trust in the Lord of hosts. The legacy of David's victory continues to inspire hearts across generations, a reminder that true power lies not in armor or might, but in faith that moves without fear. Though he was once a shepherd, he would one day be called king. Though he fought with a sling, he ruled with a heart for God. David's story is not just ancient history. It is a living testimony that when the world sees a boy, God may see a king, and when the world sees a giant, God sees an opportunity for glory. In the quiet hills of Bethlehem, a boy named David spent his days tending to sheep, walking barefoot through dusty paths and sunlit fields, playing melodies to God on his harp, and defending his flock with nothing but a sling and courage born from faith. The youngest of 8 sons of Jesse, David was overlooked by the world, and even by his own family, yet his heart was full of fearless love for the Lord. While his older brothers trained as warriors and followed King Saul to the battlefield, David remained in the wilderness, watching over sheep and talking to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But God, who sees not as man sees, looked upon the heart of David and chose him to be the future king of Israel. The prophet Samuel, sent by God, came to Jesse's house, and one by one Jesse presented his sons, but the Lord rejected them all. Finally, Samuel asked if there was any son left, and Jesse, almost as an afterthought, said, "There is still the youngest, but he is tending these sheep." Samuel insisted he be brought. As David entered, young and ruddy, with a heart glowing with purity and strength, the Lord said, "This is the one." And Samuel anointed David with oil, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him powerfully from that day forward. Meanwhile, trouble stirred in the land. The Philistines, longtime enemies of Israel, had gathered their forces to wage war and stood on one side of the valley of Elah, while Saul's army stood trembling on the other. From the Philistine camp emerged a monstrous warrior named Goliath of Gath, a giant over 9 feet tall, clad in heavy bronze armor, carrying a massive javelin and shield, and his voice thundered across the valley each day as he mocked Israel and defied their God. "Choose a man to come fight me," Goliath roared. "If he kills me, we will be your servants. But if I kill him, you will be ours." For 40 days, he shouted these challenges, and for 40 days, no one in Saul's army stepped forward. Even King Saul, once brave, was now paralyzed with fear. Meanwhile, Jesse told David to take some grain and bread to his brothers at the battlefield and return with news. When David arrived and heard Goliath's blasphemies, his heart ignited with holy rage. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" he asked. The men around him tried to quiet him, and even his oldest brother Eliab rebuked him, saying, "Why have you come here? With whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and deceit." But David replied calmly, "What have I done now? Is there not a cause?" Word reached Saul of David's boldness, and the young shepherd was brought before the king. Saul looked at the boy with concern. "You are not able to fight this Philistine. You are only a youth." But David testified with boldness, "Your servant has killed both lion and bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine." Moved by David's faith, Saul agreed and said, "Go, and the Lord be with you." He offered David his armor, but David tried and could not move freely. "I cannot go in these," he said, and instead he took his staff, chose 5 smooth stones from the brook, placed them in his shepherd's pouch, and with his sling in hand, walked toward the valley where death and destiny waited. As David approached, Goliath laughed, his deep voice echoing, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" He sneered, "Come here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals." But David answered without fear, his voice strong as the wind. You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head, and the whole world will know there is a God in Israel. Then David ran quickly toward the giant. Time seemed to slow. Heart stopped. The sky held its breath. David reached into his pouch, took out a stone, placed it in his sling, spun it once, twice, 3 times, and released. The stone flew like lightning and struck Goliath in the forehead. The giant stumbled forward, eyes wide, then collapsed face down with a thunderous crash. Silence swept over the valley. Israel watched, stunned. The boy stood victorious. David ran, took Goliath's own sword, and cut off his head. The Philistines screamed in horror and fled, and Israel surged forward, shouting in victory, chasing them to the gates of Ekro and Gath. That day, the name of David was written in the hearts of the people, not just as a shepherd, but as a deliverer. Saul asked his commander, "Whose son is this youth?" And David, still holding the severed head of the giant, answered, "I am the son of Jesse of Bethlehem." From that day, Saul kept David close, and the people sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." Yet David remained humble, always remembering it was not by his strength that he won, but by the strength of the Lord. This was only the beginning of David's long and storied life. He would win battles, suffer betrayals, play music that soothed the tormented spirit of King Saul, become a fugitive chased across deserts, write psalms of sorrow and songs of praise, and rise to be Israel's greatest king. But all of it, his crown, his legacy, his name remembered forever, began on a battlefield, where a boy who trusted God stood against a giant who trusted only in armor. David's victory is not merely the defeat of one enemy, but the timeless triumph of faith over fear, obedience over pride, and light over darkness. He fought not for personal glory, but for the name of the Lord. In the valley where others fled, he stepped forward. Where others saw danger, he saw opportunity to honor God. That is the heart of a warrior, the soul of a king. His life reminds us that when we are surrounded by giants, when we feel small, weak, and unnoticed, when fear and voices of doubt tell us we are unworthy, we can remember the boy with the sling and 5 stones, and know that the battle belongs to the Lord. David's story echoes through generations, not because of his size or skills, but because of his heart. He wasn't the oldest, the tallest, or the most trained. He was simply willing. God didn't need a soldier. He needed a servant. And that servant, armed only with trust, changed the course of history.